My family said I was too embarrassing for my brother's elite in-laws. What kind of revenge is even left after that? My own father called me embarrassing, telling me I'd humiliate my brother's elite new in-laws. What he didn't know. Those same in-laws had been secretly trusting my numbers to save their multi-million-dollar business. And the night my family tried to hide me, my face ended up screaming my name on a wall, right in front of them all. This is the story of how I went from family black sheep to unexpected savior, in a twist none of us saw coming. My name is Nora Bennett. I am 30 years old, and a few weeks ago, I was standing in the hallway holding a mug of coffee when my father's voice cut through the air from the living room. Your brother's in-laws are elite. You'll humiliate us. Do you understand, Nora? Don't ruin this. He said it like I was a problem to be managed, not his daughter. My brother Ethan had just gotten engaged to a millionaire heir, the kind of woman you see in glossy hotel magazines. Suddenly, my messy data nerd life in Austin was a threat to their shiny new image. They didn't care that I spent my nights rebuilding hotel revenue models and fixing broken booking systems. To them, I was just the awkward girl who asked too many questions at dinner and never knew what fork to use. So while they packed suitcases full of designer outfits for a New Year's Eve engagement party at a luxury resort, I was told to stay home and keep things simple. They didn't want me at the party. They didn't want me anywhere near the people they called elite. And they definitely didn't want anyone knowing I was part of the family. What they did not know was that those same elite in-laws had been working with me for months under a different name, trusting my numbers to save their business. I didn't grow up thinking I was embarrassing. As a kid, I just thought I was different. While other kids at our family barbecues ran around the yard, I was the one sitting at the plastic table, counting how many hot dogs people took and wondering why Uncle Mike always left early. I asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. Why do you invest in that company if their debt is so high? Why do you say we're fine with money if mom works 2 jobs? People laughed, then stopped inviting me into conversations. My parents, Thomas and Karen Bennett, would pull me aside afterward. Nora, can you please just be normal for once? Smile. Talk about school. Don't interrogate people. Meanwhile, my older brother Ethan was everything they wanted. He knew exactly when to laugh, when to compliment someone's watch, when to ask about golf. At his high school graduation dinner, I remember standing too close to the waiter, asking about tips and wages, and bumping into a tray of marinara sauce. Red splattered all over a guest's white dress. The whole table went silent. My mother's face turned the color of that sauce. Thomas grabbed my arm so hard it hurt and hissed, "This is exactly what I mean. You don't belong in these settings." After that, I stopped trying to fit in at their kind of party. Instead, I buried myself in numbers. In high school, I taught myself spreadsheets for fun. In college, while other people were posting pictures from frat parties, I was running A/B tests on website layouts for a tiny bed and breakfast that couldn't afford a real agency. I studied business analytics and computer science, discovering that I could take messy data and turn it into clean answers. Hotels and guest houses started coming to me with the same problem. Too many empty rooms, not enough guests. I would sit in my tiny dorm room, staring at charts at 3 in the morning, tweaking prices and ad strategies until the graphs finally turned upward. Back home in the suburbs of Austin, though, none of that mattered. When I mentioned landing my first client, my mother smiled politely and said, "So, you're still doing that online thing?" My dad waved it off. "It's just temporary. She'll get a real job eventually." Ethan, on the other hand, went straight into law after college, joined a corporate firm, and instantly became the golden boy again. My parents introduced him to everyone as our future partner at a big firm in Dallas, our pride and joy. When I showed up to family dinners in jeans after a 12-hour day consulting for 3 small hotels at once, my mother whispered, "Could you at least pretend you're not working from your bedroom?" At some point, something in me snapped. If they were never going to see my value in the room, I would build it quietly outside the room. I registered my own small consulting business, Bennett Analytics, and started saying no when my parents tried to drag me to parties where I knew I would be the punchline. I chose data over dinner tables, dashboards over polite small talk. And while they were busy polishing Ethan's image, I was slowly learning something they had no idea about. In the right hands, numbers can change the fate of an entire company. The question was, what would happen the day my numbers collided with their obsession over status? The first time Harrington and Vail, H&V, came into my life, it was because someone else was desperate. I was in my apartment one sticky Austin afternoon, half asleep over a spreadsheet, when an email popped up with the subject line, "Urgent. Mid-size resort chain in trouble. Can you help?" A small agency I had freelanced for before was panicking. They had a client whose bookings had crashed after the pandemic, a luxury brand with big marketing budgets and even bigger expectations. They needed someone who could make sense of the mess, fast. That client was Harrington and Vail Resorts, though at that moment it was just a logo and a name and an attachment. A few hours later my phone rang. "This is Graham Harrington," the voice said, measured but frayed at the edges. "We've been told you can pull numbers out of the fire." I sat up a little straighter. "No camera," he added quickly. "Our connection is awful right now. Let's just keep this on audio." That was fine by me. I like not being seen. Over the next hour he laid it all out. Their flagship properties were half empty. Competitors were eating their market share. And the last agency had burned through a 7-figure budget with almost nothing to show. "We need someone who actually understands data, not just pretty presentations," he said. "Can you dive into our systems, tell us what's broken and fix it?" I should have been intimidated, but what I felt was something else entirely. Clarity. This was just a very large version of the same puzzle I had been solving for years. I asked for access to their booking system, ad accounts, website analytics. Within days I was combing through years of numbers, spotting patterns no one on their team had noticed. Their pricing was static in a market that had become insanely dynamic. Their ads were targeting the wrong age groups in the wrong cities. Their website was bleeding potential guests at the checkout step because the mobile form was a nightmare. So I built a plan. We tested dynamic pricing tied to demand curves, shifting rates by tiny percentages based on seasonality and real-time searches. We shut off half their useless ad campaigns and rerouted the budget into high-intent search traffic and targeted social audiences. I mapped out packages for remote workers, staycation families, people who wanted long weekends within driving distance instead of international trips. It was riskier than the safe reports they were used to seeing. And I told them that. Graham paused on the phone, then said, "If your numbers are right, we have nothing left to lose. Do it." For the first round of tests, I even put some of my own consulting fee on the line, structuring part of it as performance-based. If I failed, I would make almost nothing. If it worked, both of us would win. The first month, the graphs moved a little. The second month, they bent hard upward. Booking rates climbed, revenue followed, and even the board stopped breathing down Graham's neck. He called me late one evening, his voice lighter than I had ever heard it. "You have no idea what you've done for us, Nora. Our team is putting together a case study wall at our main resort to celebrate the turnaround. We want your face on it, your name, everything." I laughed and told him I preferred to stay behind the scenes, but I sent over a professional headshot anyway, just in case they insisted. On the internal mock-up they emailed me, my photo sat there in a gold frame with the caption, "Data and Growth Strategist, Nora Bennett." I closed the file before I could think too much about it. To me, it was just one more quiet win no one at home needed to know about. What I didn't realize then was that the same revived resort chain would soon host a glittering charity gala. And at that gala, my polished older brother, Ethan, would meet a woman named Leah Harrington, the millionaire heir my parents would fall in love with long before they ever accepted me. Ethan called me about 3 months after that first big turnaround for Harrington and Vail. His voice bright in a way I recognized from every time he thought he was leveling up. "Hey, you free to grab coffee? I have news." We met at a sleek spot downtown, the kind of place with concrete floors and overpriced cortados. He walked in wearing a tailored suit, even though it was a Saturday. That easy smile plastered on his face. I could tell before he said a word that whatever he was about to tell me would make our parents very, very proud. He didn't even let me finish my hello. "I'm engaged," he said, dropping the word between us like a trophy. "To Leah. Leah Harrington." The name hit me like a glitch in my brain. Harrington. As in Harrington and Vail. I asked carefully. "Yeah," he said, eyes shining. "Her family owns this insane resort empire. They host charity events and political fundraisers like all the time. Dad is freaking out in a good way." I forced a smile. I had spent months inside that empire's numbers, saving them from collapse, but in Ethan's world, I was always 10 steps behind whatever image he was curating. That's great, I said. I'm happy for you. We talked for a while about the proposal, about the ring, about how our parents reacted. Of course they were thrilled. This is the kind of connection they'd always dreamed of. The gilded doorway into the world they admired from magazines and TV. It wasn't until Ethan finished his story that his expression shifted, as if he'd been saving the uncomfortable part for last. So there's a New Year's Eve engagement party, he began, tracing the rim of his cup, at one of Leia's family resorts. It's going to be huge. Her parents are inviting donors, business partners, a couple of politicians. It's a big deal. I nodded, waiting for the part where he asked if I needed help booking flights or choosing a dress. Instead, he cleared his throat. Look, Nora, he said, and my stomach went cold. I think it's better if you sit this one out. I stared at him. Sit it out? It's your engagement party. It's a very particular crowd, he said slowly. Leia's parents, they're friends, they're used to a certain environment. You know how you get in those situations. How I get? I repeated, my voice sharper. He lifted his hands like a shield. You ask those heavy questions. You make people uncomfortable. You don't really play the game. Dad thinks it might be too stressful for you. Too stressful for me or too embarrassing for you? I asked. He winced, which told me everything I needed to know. Ethan, I work with hotels and resorts for a living. I wanted to say I know more about the kind of people you're trying to impress than you do. But he just kept talking. We only get one shot at a first impression with Leia's family. They're elite, Nora. They're used to certain manners, certain optics. Mom and Dad are already nervous. They think it's safer if you don't come. Safer. Like I was some unpredictable storm that might ruin his big night. I laughed, but it came out flat. So, I'm not invited to my own brother's engagement party because I don't fit the optics. He couldn't meet my eyes. It's not like that, he muttered. We'll have a smaller family dinner later. Just us. You know I love you, right? You know this is just strategy. When I got home, my parents were in the living room, voices low and urgent. I stopped in the hallway unseen. Your brother's in-laws are elite, Dad was saying. We can't risk Nora rambling about money or calling out someone's business model. She'll humiliate us. Karen sighed. She doesn't mean to, Tom. But this could be Ethan's doorway into something better. We can't let her ruin it. The words landed harder than any physical slap. Upstairs, my laptop was still open on a dashboard from Harrington and Vale, the same logo that would be embossed on the invitations to Ethan's New Year's Eve celebration. They were terrified I would embarrass them in front of the very people whose fortunes I'd helped rebuild. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. Fine, I thought. If they want to hide me, let them. They have no idea how small their version of this story really is. They think this party is about optics. They don't realize that somewhere in the middle of all that champagne and glitter, my name is already hanging on their in-laws' walls, waiting to blow their perfect little strategy apart. New Year's Eve came faster than I wanted it to. The week between Christmas and the 31st felt like limbo, like the world was holding its breath. My parents were buzzing around the house talking about flights and outfits, and what gift would be appropriate for the Harringtons. Ethan sent me a picture of the invitation once. All gold foil and embossed logos. Wish you could come, he wrote, as if that decision had not been made very deliberately without me. On the morning of the party, I watched them leave for the airport in their best clothes. My mother in a new dress she absolutely could not afford without putting something on a credit card. My father adjusting a tie he had bought on sale but pretended was designer. They waved and I waved back from the doorway. The beautiful daughter, who had been told to stay home for her own good. When the Uber pulled away, the house went quiet in a way that felt like a weight pressing on my chest. That night, Austin glittered with fireworks and rooftop parties, but I stayed in my apartment with takeout and my laptop open on the coffee table. I tried turning on a movie but my phone kept lighting up. Photos from my mother of the resort lobby dripping in chandeliers. Videos from Ethan of Champagne Towers, a live band. Leia walking down a grand staircase in a silver gown like she had stepped out of a magazine. In one clip I could hear my dad in the background telling someone, "That's my son up there. He's marrying into the Harrington family." I stared at the screen until the images blurred. They were inside the world they had always worshipped, and they had done everything possible to make sure I was nowhere near it. So I closed the photos and opened a different window. The analytics dashboard for Harrington and Vale's year-end performance. Real-time booking numbers flickered across the screen. Rows of data reflecting reservations pouring into the same brand my brother was celebrating with while they smiled for pictures. I watched occupancy rates climb and revenue bars fill in. The lines I had helped bend upward, turning into bonuses and holiday parties for people who would never know my name. An email notification popped up in the corner of my screen. Subject line: Year-end update and a special request. It was from Graham Harrington. I clicked it open, half expecting a brief thank you and a spreadsheet. Instead, he had written a full paragraph about how transformative the past year had been. How the board had gone from panic to cautious optimism to open excitement. "You didn't just tweak a few ads, Nora," he wrote. "You changed the way we understand our business. We want to honor that properly." There was an attachment at the bottom of the email labeled Concept, Wall of Innovation. When I opened it, my breath caught. It was a mock-up of the entrance to one of their flagship resorts. A long wall lined with framed case studies. Each frame had a photo, a title, a short description of the project. Near the center of the wall was my own headshot, cleaner and more confident than I felt in real life. Beneath a plaque that read, Data and Growth Strategist, Nora Bennett. The description underneath summarized the turnaround I had led. Dynamic pricing overhaul, demand-driven campaigns, recovery from post-pandemic slump. Guests would walk past this wall on their way into conferences and galas, clinking glasses under chandeliers while my face watched from the middle. "We're planning to unveil this at a major partners and family event next season," Graham continued. "We'd love to finally meet you in person, introduce you to some of the people whose jobs you helped save." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. On my phone, another photo came in from my mother. Ethan and Leia cuddled together under a shower of confetti. My parents blurred in the background, eyes shining. I imagined that somewhere, not far from where they were posing, that wall might eventually exist. My framed photos silently contradicting every story they'd told about me being a disappointment. How ironic would it be if the place they were so desperate to shield from my presence ended up being the one place that insisted on putting my face front and center? I replied to Graham with a simple professional yes. Told him I'd be honored to attend when the time came. Then I set my phone face down, leaned back on my couch, and listened to the distant echo of fireworks outside. They thought they had erased me from this night, that they'd finally found a world high enough that I couldn't reach it. But the truth was sitting right there on my laptop screen in a gold frame. My name stitched into the foundation of their shiny new life. They just hadn't realized yet that the person they were so determined to hide was already woven into every corner of their precious elite circle, waiting for the moment the picture on that wall would blow their perfect image apart. The months after that New Year's Eve felt like someone had quietly turned up the brightness on my life, while my family kept acting like I was still sitting in the dark. Harrington and Vale signed a long-term contract, then another, pulling me into meetings about expansion, new properties, even acquisitions. I was suddenly on late-night calls about opening resorts in California and the Caribbean, running simulations on what would happen if they shifted their entire pricing structure for shoulder season. My days blurred into dashboards and strategy decks, the kind of work people in my world dream about. My bank account felt it too. I swapped my old hatchback for a reliable hybrid, finally fixed the leak in my bathroom ceiling, and moved into a one-bedroom apartment that didn't feel like it might collapse during a thunderstorm. I did all of that quietly. No big announcements, no social media humble brags. I knew exactly how my parents would react if I tried to explain performance-based contracts or retention bonuses. They would smile, nod, and ask if I had thought about applying for a real job at a local office. Meanwhile, Ethan's life looked like a highlight reel. My mom sent me constant updates, photos of him and Leia at wine tastings, charity balls, luxury retreats, screenshots of articles mentioning the Harrington name with captions like, "Your brother was there last night." Can you imagine? Over Sunday dinners when I did show up, the conversation revolved around wedding plans and guest lists, and how incredible it was that our family would soon belong at events where people wore tuxedos and talked about offshore accounts. Once over meatloaf, Ethan said, "Graham is bringing in some kind of genius consultant for their new data strategy. Guy's basically a wizard with numbers. If I play this right, I could end up working on some of those deals." I took a slow sip of water to hide my reaction. Mom looked impressed. "See, that's the kind of company you want to be around," she said. "People who know how to make things happen." I wondered what she would say if I told her the so-called wizard had spent that morning arguing with Graham about whether we should cap occupancy during certain holidays to protect long-term brand value. And that wizard was me. But I didn't say anything. Let them talk about proximity to power. I was busy building it. One afternoon in early fall, an email came in from Graham's assistant that made me sit up straighter. "We're finalizing details for the Partners and Family Gala at our Miami flagship," she wrote. "It's both a celebration of this year's turnaround and an engagement gala for Miss Leah Harrington and Mr. Ethan Bennett. Graham and Celeste are especially excited to honor you that evening. They'd like you front and center when we unveil the Wall of Innovation." Attached was the official invitation, embossed and heavy even through the screen. My name was printed near the top of the guest list under a section labeled Strategic Partners. My brother's name sat lower under Family of the Groom. For a second I just stared. I hadn't heard from my parents yet about this event, but I could already imagine the conversation. They'd brag about being invited to an ultra-exclusive New Year's gala at Leia's favorite resort. They'd talk about how limited the guest list was, how only the right people were allowed in, and somewhere between the speeches and the champagne, they'd plan to quietly keep me out of the picture again. The difference this time was simple. The Harringtons were not inviting me as Ethan's awkward sister. They were inviting me as the person who had changed the trajectory of their business. I called Graham to confirm details, keeping my voice steady. He sounded genuinely excited. "We've been telling everyone about you," he said. "I can't wait to see their faces when they realize the person behind those numbers is real." I hung up, leaned back in my chair, and let the irony sink in. My family had spent an entire year trying to manage me out of their perfect narrative, convinced I would embarrass them in front of their elite in-laws. But at this party in that glittering resort, there would be no hiding me. My face would be waiting for them the moment they walked through the door. Framed in gold, my name etched in metal. They thought they were climbing into a world where I didn't belong. They were about to find out that world had been mine long before they ever stepped into it. The Harrington flagship in Miami looked exactly like the kind of place my parents fantasized about when they flipped through glossy magazines. Marble floors, towering palms and oversized planters, the kind of floral arrangements that probably cost more than my first car. The night of the gala, the air was warm and humming with money. Staff in crisp uniforms moved like choreography, guiding guests toward the grand ballroom. I arrived early as requested, not as Ethan's sister, but as one of the strategic partners. A coordinator handed me a badge with my name printed in clean black letters. Nora Bennett, Data and Growth Strategist. Seeing it made something twist in my chest. For once, my identity wasn't being minimized into, "She does something online." Inside the foyer, the Wall of Innovation stretched along one side, just like the mock-up. Gold frames, soft lighting, each case study telling a piece of the company's survival story. My frame sat near the center. My photo, my name, my work. Graham and Celeste came over, all smiles and genuine warmth. They introduced me to board members, department heads, people whose livelihoods were tied to decisions I had helped shape. For the first hour, I forgot about my family entirely. I talked numbers and future plans and laughed at a CFO's joke about forecasting. I was in my element. Then I heard my mother's voice. It floated in from the lobby, high and nervous. "Oh, this place is wow. Ethan, look at that chandelier." I turned just enough to see them enter. My dad in a suit that suddenly looked cheaper under the chandeliers. My mom clutching a clutch bag like it might run away. Ethan and Leia walking ahead like they belonged there. My instinct was to shrink back, to move behind someone taller. But the staff had already been trained on who I was. One of them stepped forward, smiling at me. "Ms. Bennett, can we get you near the wall? Mr. Harrington wants you close for the announcement." So instead of hiding, I found myself standing just a few feet from my own framed photo as my family crossed the foyer. They didn't see me at first. Their eyes were on the decor, the people, the promise of what this night meant for them. Celeste gently tapped her champagne glass, calling for a bit of attention. Guests turned toward her, conversations softening to a hush. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice clear. "Tonight is about family and partnership. About the people who held this company up when things looked impossible." She gestured toward the wall. Over the last year, we built this to remind ourselves that numbers are not just charts. They are people. People who changed everything when we needed it most. She stepped closer to my frame, smiling. One of those people is someone very dear to us now. She pointed right at my photo. This is Nora Bennett. The floor seemed to tilt for a second. My parents froze mid-sentence. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound of my name. Celeste read the plaque out loud. Data and growth strategist, the mind behind the turnaround that kept these resorts alive when travel was at its worst. You have no idea how often we've said her name this year. She turned, following the line from the frame to where I stood. Then her eyes went wide like she'd just solved a puzzle she hadn't realized was there. Nora, she said, and then louder, full of delight. Nora Bennett, you're here. You're Ethan's sister. Head swiveled. Dozens of people turned to look at me, then at Ethan, then at my parents. The silence that followed said more than any speech. Graham stepped up beside Celeste, his gaze landing on my family with a professional politeness that had just turned sharp. You never told us your daughter was our Nora, he said to my parents. Thomas opened his mouth. Shut it. Looked like he wanted to melt into the marble. My mom stammered. We didn't realize you knew her like that. She does some kind of computer work. We didn't think it was, important for tonight. A few nearby guests exchanged looks. Graham's jaw tightened just enough for me to catch it. Important, he repeated. Without her, this party doesn't happen. This building doesn't stay this full. Half the people in this room would be updating their resumes. Celeste laughed lightly, trying to soften the tension, but her words carried weight. We've been bragging about her for months, she said. I can't imagine hiding someone like Nora. Ethan's face went pale. He looked at me like I had betrayed him simply by existing. Nora, he said under his breath when he finally reached me. You didn't tell me you were working with them. I held his gaze. You didn't ask, I replied. Later, away from the crowd, my parents cornered me in a quiet hallway. My mom's voice shook. You made us look like fools, she whispered. We had no idea. I cut her off gently. You didn't realize that I mattered to them, that my work mattered, or that your embarrassing daughter became the person propping up your precious in-laws' empire. My dad tried to recover his authority. You could have warned us, Nora. We would have prepared differently. I almost laughed. Prepared how? By inviting me this time? By pretending you were proud? Ethan stepped forward, eyes glassy. Look, maybe we handled things wrong, he said. But you know how Mom and Dad are. We just wanted everything to go smoothly. You do, he added quickly, right? Want to be part of this family. That was the moment something inside me settled. I realized I'd spent years twisting myself into knots, chasing a version of belonging that always came with conditions. Don't say too much. Don't ask the hard questions. Don't outshine the person they decided was the star. I took a breath. I will always be your sister, I told Ethan. And I will always be their daughter. But I'm done begging to sit at a table where the price of admission is pretending I'm less than what I am. I'm not going to shrink anymore so you can appear bigger. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Nora, we were just afraid, she said quietly. Afraid you'd embarrass us. I nodded. And tonight, you found out the only thing embarrassing was how little you believed in me. That's on you, not on me. Back in the ballroom, when Graham introduced me on stage as a key partner, the applause felt different than any approval I had chased growing up. It wasn't polite clapping from relatives who barely listened. It was people who had seen the results and valued them. People who didn't care if I wore the wrong dress or asked weird questions as long as I showed up with the kind of clarity that kept their lights on. Standing there under that soft golden light, I understood something I wish someone had taught me years earlier. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't dramatic or cruel. It's choosing to stop handing your worth to people who only know how to discount it. It's letting your success speak in rooms where they never thought your voice would be heard and refusing to dim yourself just so insecure people can feel tall. If your family has ever made you feel like the embarrassing one, the extra one, the one who needs to be hidden so they can look good, I want you to hear this. Their inability to see your value does not erase the value itself. You are allowed to build a life that honors who you are. Even if that means creating distance from the people who taught you to doubt it. You're allowed to love them and still say no when their expectations crush you. In the end, my parents had to walk past that framed photo of me every time they moved through the resort that night. My name etched into the wall of the world they worshipped. They were the ones shrinking, avoiding eye contact, rehearsing apologies. I just kept walking, shoulders back, finally understanding that the real glow-up wasn't getting accepted by them. It was learning to accept myself first. And if you've ever been the one they tried to hide, I hope my story reminds you that you're not alone. Have you ever had to choose between being true to yourself and fitting into your family's expectations? What happened when you finally stood up for your own worth? Tell me in the comments below.